Hi, I am here with Erika Olson, who some of you have gotten to know through my site for many, many years. Erika and I have worked together. Um, and if you're scheduling any kind of workshop or event, Erika is who you have been interacting with. So, hi, Erika.
Hi, Sarri. Great to see you.
Oh, it's so good to have you on as a guest instead of anything else.
Isn't
So,
this fun? Yes.
this is really fun. Now, you've been engaged in this really interesting project kind of since the pandemic started. Can you tell us about that?
Yep, absolutely. During the pandemic, some people learned to bake bread or started running again. And I decided that my pandemic project would be civics, which is not what most people chose, right? But
But
it's
on some
really,
level, we've all been, very concerned about our civic society and our communities. And so actually civics makes a lot of sense because I think that's where many of our concerns have shown up.
for sure. And it's been a really murky time to figure out what to do. People have been super worried and people have been trying to engage maybe, or honestly trying to disengage. Lots of people have been just retreating because it's super overwhelming and feels like the stakes are really high in our personal lives sometimes when we try to get engaged with civics. So this is very different, the approach that I have taken. So I applied for a fellowship with an organization called Citizen University, which is national, but happens to be headquartered right here in Seattle. So right in my backyard. And I applied in July of 2020. And then in February, I started this fellowship. So I have been trained by Citizen University to lead these gatherings called Civic Saturday. And it's not what you might expect. We're not studying policy and we're not debating the merits of different municipal issues. It's really a very human gathering. It's sort of equivalent in a civic way to a faith gathering. So we are people who may or may not know each other. We have songs, we have poetry, we do readings, and we have these discussions that are definitely about the issues, definitely focused on what's going on in our society today, but in a really human way, a really individual
Personal, sounds like more of a
person way.
personal way. Mhm.
Absolutely.
So how have these been working and what have you learned by engaging this way with people?
Well, they've been working. And that was the surprise for me personally, because I sort of thought, all right, this has been happening all over the country and they've been training people to do this, but is this really what people want? I was a little skeptical. As much as I was all in with the training and ready to give it a go, when it came time to start hosting my own gatherings, I was sort of like, I don't know if this is what people really want to hear about right now.
Mm-hmm.
For all of those reasons that we've already alluded to. People are very divided. People are afraid to speak up in many ways
Well,
because
if
they're worried
somebody is
about
listening to
backlash.
if somebody is listening to this and they would like to go to your Civic Saturday, how do they do that?
Well, I've hosted all that I'm doing for this year, so my series for next year is in the planning stages.
Okay.
But in the meantime, citizenuniversity.us is the master site where you can go to a Civic Saturday, sometimes hosted locally, sometimes hosted somewhere across the country. The beauty of the virtual world that we live in is that you can attend a Civic Saturday that's happening in Tennessee, if that's the next one that you can make it to.
Oh, cool. Oh,
Yeah.
cool. So they just go online and they go and they'll see what's up there. And then so people did show up, much to your surprise, in the ones that you hosted this year. So what was like the size of a gathering and what did you learn from the experience?
Yeah, the people who came, of course, I had friends who I leaned on who I asked very, in a heartfelt way, will you please show up to make sure I'm not doing this by myself, right?
I'm having a party, but I don't want to be alone. Right?
Exactly. Please come to my party. Right. Exactly. The surprise was in how word spread and how at my most recent Civic Saturday, I didn't know most of the people.
Wow.
They were not known to me. So I had a handful of folks who I had invited who returned. I have a few people who've come to all of them, which is really great. But a
Wow.
lot of these folks were strangers to me. So
Hey.
it just goes to show that people are really hungry for this sort of camaraderie, and this feeling that I'm not doing this by myself. The world is not a terrible place in all ways. A lot of people really do care, want to connect, and want to figure out what they can do.
So you explained that there's some poetry, there's some music, there's some connecting time, it sounds like. And then is there like a topic? Can you give an example of like a topic that you've discussed that our
Yeah.
listeners can sample out?
Sure. And these are always nonpartisan. So, we're not espousing a political point of view at all. But the most recent gathering that
All these people have political points of view, so doesn't that come out?
it comes out in the discussions.
Okay.
It is not reflected in the group presentation. We present, I've read text from James Baldwin, and we've also had text from President Eisenhower. So, we're pulling from a lot of different sources when it comes to trying to illuminate, what are the questions that we're facing today, and what sort of wisdom do we have in our civic history that we can pull from and sort of reflect on to help us have context and to help us see maybe we're not the first ones to be facing this question. Maybe there are things that we can learn from the past that are applicable today. So the discussion is where people feel free to, let their opinions fly. But the presentation is on a more universal conceptual sort of level. So we talked about the principles of a better argument, for instance.
Okay.
So that's not partisan. And it's very much on the minds of just about everyone. And if you've had
Can you give us some samples? Like, what are the principles of a better argument?
Sure. Well, very succinctly, one of the main ones is be kind first and be right later.
Wow.
And I have a personal illustration of that where an argument went very poorly because we were no longer interested in being kind. We were much more focused on being right. We lost sight of the relationship. We just were very much focused on being right. And if being right is your only objective, you're not going to gain any ground with the person that you're trying to have a conversation with. You still have to stay engaged person to person and not just see red and put blinders on and be so focused on your rightness. The other thing too that comes out is just the need to have a little humility as we're having these disagreements, because there's not a soul on the planet who knows everything there is to know, right? We can always learn something from someone else's perspective. So that's the other key.
So the purpose of this, it sounds like, is really getting to have meaningful dialogue about community and about civic issues. And there isn't really an agenda of necessarily bridging a divide as much as there is bridging understanding between people. Am I getting that?
It's very much part of it. Yes. Really the purpose of these gatherings is to help sustain people's faith that this system can work. We're in this American democracy together. And in so many ways, it feels really broken. And it's easy to feel like, this just isn't working and it can't work for all of these different reasons. But but really there's so much that's happening that's really positive. And it only works if we all really believe that it can still work, because it requires us to be engaged. If all of us opt out, yeah, it will fail, because the system doesn't work without us. You know, it's of the people, by the people, for the people. You need the people.
Wow, that is so deep, Erika. That is so deep. So this is really about not giving up on democracy.
It really is. I mean, in a very
Wow.
personal, person to person, community to community sort of level, yeah, that's what it is.
This must feel really meaningful for you in these times right now to have a process that you're not having to invent, that you've been
Mhm.
trained in, and a process that is particularly called for these particular times.
It is. It's amazing. And I've connected with so many people across the country who are doing this work too. And everyone has their own way of doing it. Some people are more oriented toward song and dance and activity. You know, some people are a little more cerebral and it takes on more of sort of a lecture sensibility. Other people are very poetic and they tap into more emotional sides of gathering with folks. And so I
So
kind of
how
try to
how
dabble.
long is the gathering? How much do people commit to this process to attend?
Mine are an hour, some are
Mhm.
longer. I like to keep mine to an hour. I feel like that's a reasonable amount of time to ask of people right now. Lots of people shy away from this, you know. It's not something that you think this is what I want to do on my Saturday morning necessarily, unless you hear about it from a friend or you see a preview or
Well,
you
yeah, that's I'm
for
thinking
it.
that, since we know you, Erica, this is coming from a very known, trusted source. Somebody, I can't even count how many years I've worked with you. It's been more
Great
than a
question.
it's been more than a
A
decade.
decade for sure.
It's been more than a decade. So when you know somebody this well and work with them this closely, you're a very trusted source to me. So if you feel like this is really effective and that you've been so engaged in it has really been interesting. And I know that we have lots of listeners who are looking for a safe place to have these kinds of discussions, but to have them facilitated in a way that has meaning and purpose. And it just sounds like it's very touching. So does everybody have a chance to talk in this, or is it more a question is thrown out and they're in small groups?
It can be both. We do some discussion all together as a group, and it all depends on how many folks come. If we've got 50 people in the room, I'm not going to try that. But if we have
Right.
15, you know, it's a great opportunity to just open the floor and let those who want to speak up, speak up. But mostly
Right.
it's in small groups because it feels like the stakes are lower when you're talking to 2 or 3 or 4 people.
Yeah. Yeah. And
You
have
can
you,
really just be unpolished and not think about what you're saying or how you're delivering it, but just speak like you would turn to someone in a
so,
room and just have conversation.
yeah. So what was the most interesting topic you think for you personally that's come up in these?
Uh, I don't know if I can pick, honestly. There, there are such interesting things that come up in the discussions. This topic of disagreeing better is a
Mhm.
really meaty one, and there's a whole organization that's devoted to it. It's called the Better Arguments Project. So anyone who feels drawn in this direction, I so recommend you can take a training for free. And in fact, you can take more than one course totally free of charge just to learn how to have a healthier disagreement strategy kind of in your back pocket for when those situations come up. But the thing, no matter what the topic is, the thing that I love about these gatherings is that people participate so wholeheartedly. People really get the vibe, and understand that that's what these gatherings are for. People feel comforted, they feel reassured, they feel safe. It's like a community that you know has got your back, even if you're coming once every 6 months. It's just a group of like-minded folks who are interested in, you know, continuing this belief in American democracy.
I understand that you have created some ways for people to understand and use some civic engagement tools. So can you tell me about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So part of what has been happening is that people come to Civic Saturday and they feel really energized and they have to figure out, you know, now what? Now what do I do with this energy that I have? So I came up with this tool that is something that I really needed. So I'm calling it, because I can call it whatever I want, right? I made it up. I'm calling it a Civic Aid Kit. And I dreamed it up when I learned the story of how the first aid kit was invented, which is a whole other story. It's interesting, but it just gives people a resource and a place to stay focused. It walks you through, okay, what are my values? What do I care about the most when it comes to civic life and engaging as a citizen? It asks, you know, what access to power do I have? What power do I have myself as a citizen that I can leverage? And what do I want to do with it?
Wow. How powerful. This is so exciting. And so if people want to check out this kit, do you sell them? How do they get them?
Well, it's not in its final form yet. And right now it is totally free. So the only thing that I ask in return is feedback, because I want it to be really useful for people. I don't want people to come to these gatherings and then feel lost. So I want this to be something that is interactive and helpful and yet simple, because really everyone needs to make it their own. It's a really personal journey that you go on to decide, you know, what do I care about enough to stand up for, you know, to take some action.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So at this point, people can email me and I'll send it to them. And I have a little form that I want people to fill out to give me feedback. And that's really it right now. And we'll see where it goes.
You know, the thing that surprises people is what you end up engaging in. Like sometimes it's not what you think it is. Like I've been really engaged in totem poles and in getting totem poles, a totem pole, particularly in my community, taken down that is not done by Indigenous people. And so, you know, but if you would have asked me a few years ago, like, is a totem pole your calling? I wouldn't even know what you were talking about. But I think I think sometimes it's a calling, what we feel drawn to. And I hope people are open to like making discoveries about themselves and what they care about and where they want to make a difference, and that maybe that changes over time. Maybe something,
Absolutely.
right? Have you
Yeah.
seen that, Erika?
Well, and because as you get started, right, you don't know what connections you're going to be making along the way. You don't know what this community is going to lead you toward and sometimes away from. I mean, sometimes the things that we think might be the top of our list don't really turn out to be, either because it feels too big or it's too far away or you can't find a way in. I mean, there are all kinds of reasons that people make the choices that they make about how they're going to engage. And a lot of it is just, you know, it needs to be something that you connect with personally, that you also feel like you could really get some traction with.
Well, that is really exciting, Erika. So thank you for sharing that kit with us.
Yeah, I look forward to seeing what people think about it.
Yeah, so people will just email you to get the kit.
Yep, that's right.
Great,
Yep.
great. And is there anything else, any other resources that you wanted people to check out or?
Yeah, actually, I have tons of resources. So when people request the aid kit, I can also send a resource sheet. A lot of it is video. which is really easy for people to consume right now. It's hard
Right.
to, ask
Right.
people to read books and all of these weightier sort of studies. I'm
Mm.
reading lots of reports and research and all kinds of stuff, but the videos are what I think are most consumable for people right now. And so I have just a handful that I think really help.
Great. Well, thank you so much for doing what you're doing, Erica. And I am thrilled to share what you have as a resource with our listeners and our group of people, because I know that people are really looking and searching for where to kind of get involved, or where to even begin, or how to have that conversation with others or with themselves. And I feel like you're looking at all those different spheres and really welcoming people in.
Yep, we're all doing this together, that's for sure. So thanks for wanting to, help spread the word. This is what it takes, all of us, for the people, by the people, all of us.